Jai Hind and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi for the second time on Dev Talks. Dr. Bharat Karnad, who's going to help us understand the Chinese influence operations which are conducted in India, and of course, give us a hint of what Indian operations should look like around the world for India to become a power that it should and deserves to be. Sir, thank you so much for the second opportunity to talk to you. The first one actually went really well. People appreciated your point of view, and I'm eager to hear what you have to say, starting with the Chinese influence operations that we see in India. It is quite funny that we actually see the Chinese line being towed in India by certain people. It is also quite funny that, in spite of what has happened all over the place within China, in terms of our neighborhood, in terms of on our borders, in terms of trade and everything, we still have certain voices which want to or collaborate with the Chinese to actually influence certain things within India. How do you look at this, sir?
Well, look, China formally has, as you say, influence operations. They have an entire superstructure to promote it. And that involves, as you may have heard, the Confucius Institutes all over the world. There are over, I think, at last count, if something like, nearly 2,000 institutes, Confucius Institutes. The first Confucius Institute was started in Seoul, founded in Seoul, and started there in 2004. By 2018, these international Confucius Institutes located internationally in 94 countries, by the way, or maybe it's more. Um, there were about 2,000 Confucius Institutes. And using the words of a Politburo, Chinese Politburo member, this is for his words: propaganda battles on Taiwan, on human rights situations in China, Uyghur genocide, Tibet, trade, anything to promote the Chinese point of view. And this is supposedly to spread the Chinese language. So think of it. You have 2,000 institutes that ostensibly are in the business of, teaching the local youth or whoever the Chinese Mandarin language, being actually becoming vehicles and mediums for promoting Chinese line on all these issues. Think of how far the Chinese thinking then spreads. So it's hardly surprising that, say, the Indians would be affected. But here there are no Confucius institutes. But consider how the Chinese propagate their point of view. All our, sinologists in India, the China experts in India. Well, you took a look at any university, GNU, here, there. Look at all the professors. Their entire access to official China is, controlled by Beijing. So, do you think that these guys are going to be very, shall we say, critical of the Beijing regime, or to Xi Jinping, or to his policies, or to any of the Chinese actions and measures? Or will they try and, try to prevaricate on issues, just talk around it to say, well, this is the Chinese point of view, this is that, and somehow the Indian national interest gets lost. When you see the op-eds being written by JNU profs or university profs who are supposedly, who have done research in China, the entire access is controlled by the Beijing government. They cannot, therefore, for professional reasons, afford to be critical. And these then become the media, as you have just suggested, for propagating their line. And the government of India doesn't stop these guys. They are passing on their gyan, their wisdom, to their graduate students in JNU. I'm taking the case of JNU simply because it's right here. That's why. And I'm Delhi based. So what do? This is the sort of thinking we don't do. Do we have anything? Okay, The second line of influence are the petty traders and businessmen who come in to buy all kinds of cheap commodities, consumer items, and so on and so forth, small little light engineering goods, etc., from China. So much so that there are now, are you even aware that and I'm referring to a news report that came out that said that there are flights that are, shall we say, that are there from Delhi or whatever Indian city to Yiwu in Zhejiang, where the industries there actually hire these flights to bring in Indian petty traders and businessmen to come in. They don't even have to pay. They're hosted there, where the order books are ready and everybody jumping around to say, okay, what do you want? You can have lamps and you can have this and we have Ganesha statues. I mean, they produce anything that you want. And because our petty traders, because we don't have the nationalist sense, and honestly, because there's no alternative supply here, let's also be very honest. The quality is not there because we do not have that kind of the mass manufacturing methods. We haven't perfected it, right? So all these commodities then come in so cheap from China that economically, why would you turn your face against it? Why would an Indian consumer pay three times as much for an Indian product if a better product is available from China for a lesser price? See the point? It becomes difficult. So unless you ramp up your quality of your local engineering products and small light engineering products, etc., whatever it is we buy, Indians buy everything, and all of it made in China. As I said, I use the Ganesha statues only as a thing that they're so quick onto the stuff. All the Diwali lanterns, anything that you want, go to any local market. They're all Chinese made. Who do you think buys these things? Do they magically parrot drop here into our markets? There are people who go out to China. They're attracted, they're drawn to China by these means, as I've just talked to you about, where entire flights are hired by the industries in China to bring Indian traders. And they're all waiting in line, they host you, they dine you, and that's enough. Even otherwise, the Indian petty trader are quite happy to buy a cheaper product, damn the quality. But here you also have some semblance of quality, and however much you want to pay, the quality goes up. And the industry is so nicely scaled that they actually have entire price lists for the same commodity. You want a lamp, an electric fitting. Okay, they'll say, how long do you want it to last? They say, well, you can do it for 10 years, you can do it for 5 years, you can do it for 3 months. Tell whatever you want. The Indian say, oh, I'll buy it for 3 months, Then you can mark up because they look nice. You bring in here, you fix it, it works for 3 months, and then it goes off. Because they have scaled it to the cost, the quality to the cost. But when you look at it, they look beautiful. It's like, that's influence ops. The third means are what I call the infrastructure development projects that India promises or China promises. China can deliver a spanking, beautiful airport and God knows what. In 3 months' time, they'll have it flat. I mean, quite literally, I don't know how they do it. If anything we have to learn from China, we have to learn the civil engineering aspects. We should really send out our people to say, how do they build bridges? How do they build these infrastructure things in next to no time? Within 2 years, I've been to China where, previously you had to take some train or something, where suddenly now there's an international airport, international, beautiful airports. I mean, it's stunning how they do it. I've been to Kunming and you went off to Dalian out there and, there's no traffic on the roads. It's a 6-lane highway, beautifully tarred. And you ask the Chinese interlocutor, well, but there's no traffic. They say, sir, we are building for day after tomorrow. Now compare the PWD engineering stuff that you get in flyovers that are recently built. The first monsoons and there's no drainage. So at the ends there are whole kinds of water pools, you see. So the cars have to become boats to negotiate the dam stretch, right? We can't build simple things well, and yet we go out and promise, and then we don't know what we are doing. We go, okay, let me give you really a hard example. The Kaladan multimodal transport and transit corridor. We also have a CPEC like thing. This is the Kaladan multimode transit and transport corridor that was supposed to connect Calcutta to Sitwe, the port in the Bay of Bengal on the Rakhine province coast in Myanmar. It was first talked about as part of the Ganga Mekong Cooperation Initiative by Jaswant Singh in 2000, year 2000, great millennial start. Okay, 22 years later, what's happened? Just this stretch, forget about the lower Mekong, the other countries, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, and so on. We are stuck at the Myanmar thing because of 100 kilometers that connects the last mile connectivity. We are stuck there. The entire project is in limbo. Meanwhile, the original cost of some, 535 crores or something like that, or 340, 50 crores, no, sorry, 535 odd crores, has grown 6 times to 3,200 crores and still not complete. 22 years later. We have said, okay, another example for the lower Mekong countries, the entire in this connectivity program that Jaswant conceived of then, we said, okay, we'll give our expertise and we'll give technical advice for connecting digital connectivity to the countryside, to rural areas of the lower Mekong. Everybody is very happy. Wow, wow, kya baat hai? Great idea. Okay, that's good. Then we also gave money. We said we'll give you $10 million each. All right. But because there's no Indian Huawei that can give you the hardware systems, what do you think happened? They used the Indian money to buy the Chinese gear. What else could you do? Because you give the money. We don't have our own Huawei. We don't have our telecom manufacturers like Huawei that have captured 5G, 6G, and all that. Why? Because way back in the 70s, there's a committee headed by MGK Menon. You may have heard of the fellow. He was a nuclear scientist or something. There was a commission, electronics commission set up. And this guy and the commission then decided that India should emphasize software, not hardware. And therefore, we are in the situation where we are now. We don't have semiconductor chips. We do not have a fab facility. We have nothing. We rely on everything on the Chinese to give us. We are now talking about fab. I've gone into great detail in this in my 2015 book, Why India is Not a Great Power Yet, where I, analyzed the case. It is a case study I did of the fab, and people in the highest, absolute the highest levels, the Manmohan Singh regime told me that the entire thing is stuck because people raise things like, okay, how. Well, the idea was mooted that India will give tax holidays, will give concessions, will even invest, will give people who are interested from Indian corporates and so on 100 crore rupees or 10 crore rupees, 10 crore. Sorry, it was 10 billion rupees or some such thing. Okay, I mean, don't get my hold on to my figure. I'll have to check. But a substantial figure that would be attractive enough for a Foxconn Taiwan or for some great fab manufacturer, facility owner to come to India from Taiwan and Taipei and TSMC, all these guys, make it attractive, come to India and make it. Okay, why didn't it happen? Because we put in a little thing saying, oh, ho, ho, ho. But if we go on to Taiwan and so on, what about our own? This is our own corporates, by the way, who came in when they heard, we'll do it for you. They said, okay. And then they said, well, give us the 10 crore, 100 crores or 10 crore, whatever it was that was the money that was the government was prepared to spend. And then there was a fight between the corporates, and again, nothing happened. Because the whole government apparatus of state got embroiled in the war between Indian corporates. As to who should get the money for fronting for some foreign firm to have install a fab here to produce 9 nanometer chips. I mean, it's really very, very, very baffling in a way to explain the Indian state's attitude. Now we are grown up and say, okay, we are now learned, but we are lost
Time.
nearly 20 years. And now we are subject to precisely the sanctions that the Chinese can impose against you, because your entire automobile industry, your this industry, your that industry depends on supply of the integrated chips to come in from somewhere. And these are China, where they supply the cheapest. Taiwan is higher up in the quality, you have to pay more. So see how you get caught in a trap. So when we say, or when I say, criticize, why isn't the Indian government willing to cut off market access to the Chinese companies, to petty traders, to say, if you buy any damn thing, we are going to put you in the jail. You can do that. You can stop all flights coming to Xinjiang, Tivu, anywhere. No, you can't go. Or you can say, if you buy Chinese goods or import them, you can first of all ban these goods or consumer items. These are not really of great importance, right? Then the question is, can you survive without the Chinese supply of these kinds of material? Very sensitive stuff like microchips, semiconductors, lithium. I mean, because Chinese are now control everything. They control the lithium ores around the world. They've strategically gone and bought it off, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it is in Africa, in Latin America. They've gone and done it. We have done nothing because we have no strategic brains. We don't invest properly. We should invest in these kinds of things so you capture the sources of supply. Once you're sitting astride the sources of supply, the world comes to you with a begging bowl and says, "Yeah, thoda mein de do." Do you not have the strategic vision to see that this is where China is succeeding? And it's beating everybody, not just India. It's beating the United States. It goes off and buys US companies that are doing cutting edge work. It steals IPR. It steals technology. There's no compunction about it. While we are, high and mighty, we'll always, no, we will not do that. We will not do that. I've had services chiefs of staff. She said, oh, no. I mean, from Air Force. You're an Air Force branch, so I'm going to tell you. I mean, all kinds of service chiefs. I mean, if I don't want to name the fellow, I mean, he tells me, no, we should not reverse engineer. We should not reverse engineer. It'll spoil our reputation. Reputation for what? For being suckers. We haven't reverse engineered nothing. Reverse engineering is the first step to actually having your own design and development capability in all complex engineering hardware, items, whether it's a combat aircraft or something else. You reverse engineer. That's how everybody does it. The Japanese reverse engineered the British dreadnought class warships to produce their own extraordinary ships for the Second World War. Yeah, Yamamoto, the biggest aircraft carrier ever built. Their warships were better than the original British ships. And yet we shy away from, because, oh, no, we can't do that because that's not good and moral. Where's the national interest? We are not in it for charity, for God's sake. Do you think international relations is some branch of charity, Oxfam or something, where they're starving kids and you give some money? It's a harsh, dog eat dog world we
Wo-
are living in. The Chinese understand that, and that is the secret of their success in influencing people because they make no bones about it. They'll bribe where they have to, they'll do anything they have to. And yet, here, I remember I was close to a former defense minister, and he said, Bharat, I said, why have you not allowed the defense industry, even the awful defense public sector units, HAL, and all these wretched Mazga, all these crappy things the country has wasted monies on, is waste and actual drain of our resources. Why? Because bad ethos, no labor productivity, no innovation, no technology ingestion, no nothing. All we do is screwdriver from SKD and CKD kits. SKD is semi um, complete kits, and CKD is complete kits. And they just import the damn thing and they screwdriver it. And oh, we have made a plane. Oh, by that reckoning, I was a brilliant, engineer when I was 6 year old playing with Meccano. In my time, there was Meccano sets that you got from England where you just saw the thing, and then your parents will clap and oh, what a great thing! He's going to be a great engineer. Now that's our level of things, which I've written about extensively in our books. It's tragic. This screwdrivering technology, we say we made it, and then we claim, oh, this aircraft is Indian built aircraft, Indian produced, and this is what Atmanirbharta still is. We are still screwdrivering Sukhoi 30 MKI and claiming it's our product, we made it indigenously. What exactly have you done? So I'm going away from the subject of China, but all this matters. The Chinese have systematically gone about it. Reverse engineer, try it. They first, there's a story that's told. Someone told me, a Chinese contact, when I was in Shanghai or something. I don't know. I can't remember now. He said, "Look, the first J-10 aircraft was when it was made. It was, by the way, it's a copy of the Lavi, Israeli Lavi aircraft. They bought the technology. Usually they didn't. They usually steal it. Now they legitimately bought it. Why? Because the Americans stopped the Lavi program from going ahead in Israel. The Israelis wanted to make the money. Okay, they said you can buy it. They bought it off. The J-10 was built. They never built an aircraft before. They reverse engineered everything from the MiG 17, 15, 17, 19s to 21s. All the aircraft are that, right? But by the time they got to their own JF-17 that they call the Freedom, whatever fighter they have that's given to Pakistan, the JF-17. It is basically a souped up 21, MiG 21, right? Now they bought the Lavi J-10. They didn't know what it was. This was foreign, right? They had not reverse engineered it. They had bought the designs. They didn't know how much confidence they could, have in this foreign product. So they put it together somehow, and then the question was, who's going to test fly it? Well, test fly is a inherently risky business, right? So what happened? So the story goes, and this is a story that, in a sense, perhaps depicts the attitude of the state, the Chinese state. And the story is that the commander, whoever said, okay, or the test facility, Shenyang Aircraft Company or whatever, or Norinco, I don't know what it was. One of these companies came out and said, okay, we have a thing ready. Who is the great hero of the communist revolution or some shit? Who's going to fly the first plane and this, that. No one stood out. No one stepped up. Then the question is, okay. Then they said, okay, if you do not volunteer, you're all going to virtually the salt mines kind of a thing. That's the option. You don't want to volunteer, fine, but we give you the free will. You can now go to the salt mines, meaning do hard labor, right? So then everybody stepped up and said, yeah, fine. And this is apocryphal
That's how they
story.
do it. Mm.
It's an apocryphal story. It may not be
Yeah,
true.
yeah,
But
yeah.
the point is that's the hard-headed attitude of the state. Look, we are going to get there any which way. Whatever sacrifice we have to make, we'll make it. The point of the story is not that whether it is actual or not, but the attitude, the services, and the commander saying, hey, we will do it with our blood if it's necessary, with at the risk of our pilots' lives if it's necessary, but we will do it, right? And sure enough, the damn thing flew very well. Now they are producing everything. The only thing they've still not been able to do is produce a jet aircraft engine.
Mhm.
It's a very complex thing, as we
Mhm.
are discovering ourselves with our Kaveri project. So the point to make is we haven't gone that first step because our military services themselves hinder that first step of reverse engineering. We have reverse engineered a thing here and there. You have done it,
Mhm.
but not in the whole thing to say, okay, we are going to have a whole damn MiG 21 Bison out there,
Me too.
Indian.
Mm.
But we did it with the Tejas. And yet, who are the people who are the most opposed to Tejas? Who did not give it traction? Yeah, you guessed it, the Indian Air Force brass.
Absolutely.
Why?
Yes.
Because they imported aircraft. Why? Because they get to go to Europe, to Sweden for the what is that? The Swedish aircraft Gripen, or to Rafale, even better French, where they wined and dined in Paris. If you were to hear the stories, but you know that you ask your dad. I mean, ask anybody what the story is. That's what I mean by people who should know, who are in the know, not writing, letting the public know. I know because I deal with these people, and I'm told. I've not flown an aircraft, though I've flown a lot of simulators with the Air Force, but and I would have made a very bad pilot. I crash landed every time in a simulator. But the point is, the thing is that this is the thing that hurts us, our progress, when compared to China. We compare ourselves to China. We want to be like China. Are Baba, but the Chinese did all the hard work before they got to where they are now. We are not willing to do that. Then how do you get from here to there? In a leap? It's like crossing the Grand Canyon in a leap. You can try it, but what's going to happen? You're going to go and fall flat into the rocks, right? Get flattened. But that's the whole point. But we want to do it. Atmanirbharta is what? Basically screwdrivering. I've asked the question, how is it different from screwdrivering that the Masgaon and the HAL and everybody else and the daddies have been doing it for 75 years? Nothing. Chinese did it. Their products are bad. They're bad. But their third generation issue of the same thing will be world class. And they'll use it. They'll produce
Mm.
it. They'll amortize the investment by giving it to all the third world countries who have no quality standards, who can be bribed. Take a yellow, and they'll try
Create
and think,
influence for that. Yes.
yes. But they have no compunction. If the African countries want to buy something, they'll go, nose down as soon as it takes off. Hey, not our concern. It's
The
like
training
the
is bad.
That's right. It's like the motor car salesman. You drive it out of the showroom and it falls flat. The tires fall away. What can you do? Hey, you have paid the money. Too bad. So that's the Chinese attitude, right? But they don't have that kind of problem anymore because they pass through the stage to where they're passable hardware. They're not top class, but it saves all the outgo of funds. It builds
Exactly.
up talent, extraordinary talent at home, which we too have. If we had only done all this for 75 years, we have imported everything. Import, 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 import. Until now, it's a sickness. We are hardwired into thinking that anything that we import is better than anything we can make at home. When the Tejas actually is one of the finest platforms, fighting platforms available right now. An Israeli test pilot, a fighter pilot, and they are the best in the world, has told me, they said, I don't understand why. He said if we had developed it, we would have nothing else. We'd get rid of every other aircraft, F-16, everything. This is such a great platform. French test pilots have flown the Tejas and say, wow,
Yeah, yeah. The
this
Air
is
Force
good.
Chief of US Air Force Chief.
Whatever it is, everybody has flown it. Singapore for, defense minister comes in, Mr. Eng,
Hmm.
and he's flown and he says, it's like a beautiful car or something. Some metaphor he used. We
Hmm.
can do it. The kind of the thermodynamic, the not thermodynamic, the airflow dynamics, the software for it that we created was so good. The Lockheed people asked for it for the F-16 upgrade program.
Yeah.
For God's sake, we don't have talent. We have talent coming out of our ears. But they all go to America. They all go to here, there, or they are in research R&D centers in Bangalore, in Cyberabad, in Hyderabad, working for foreign companies, creating IP, the intellectual property rights for them, IPR for them. Why? Because our government doesn't invest in these things. What they invest in are the DPSUs. I've said make the DPSUs corporate entities where they say, okay, you sink or swim, you swim or sink. It depends on you. If you do not improve your stuff, you sink. We will not hereafter invest. But who can say it? There's huge vote bank, the entire workforce, the public sector workforce. They don't work. They strike at will. They are struck at times when India was in war and we
War.
needed
Yes.
aircraft to come out of HEL. The union they have struck work. I mean, come on. Come on. Is the government serious then? Because, look, ultimately, whatever, however we may see things, the government is ultimately the sovereign entity that decides how to work things, how to do things, what to do, what the policy should be, how should we, extend our influence, what are the means, the methods, the practices, the innate logic of doing things. That has to be clear in our minds. It's not clear. Not clear. I know, for instance, that there are people here, technology creators here in India. I know them. I met them. I've interfaced with them who have created 6G technology. Forget 5G. The photonic communications. We have where communication is done by light quanta. But we haven't aggregated the technologies to be the first in the world to say, we have a complete system. Here, come buy from us. We'll show you how it works. We have it in disaggregated forms. You know that? And if you put it together, if the government had the vision and the will and some common sense, they'd say, okay, yeah, all you guys, you have done these separate technologies, let's put it together and we can create a 6G system. We can call it, Indradhanush, whatever the damn thing, give it some name, make it a corporate entity, all these companies coming together and then sell it to the world. 6G, we have a ready-made 6G. We are going to all vault ourselves into the 6G regime. Forget 5G. Are we doing that? I have pleaded, okay, there's something called quantum computing, which you may have heard of, right?
Yes.
Quantum
Hmm.
computing is ultimate computing methods, and it's useful in cyber, all kinds of stuff, and so on. The biggest, the most pioneering theorists of quantum computing and generally quantum, uh, you know, uh, mechanics and so on and so forth involved in all this stuff are Indians. One is in Patna, and that fellow doesn't want to go abroad. He's lured all the time, by the way, with people saying, we'll give you billions of dollars, do anything you want. Please come and share your knowledge with us. No, I'm happy in Patna. Okay. He's in a sense a nationalist. Another person who is Indian is my personal friend, who was a nuclear. He was in. I won't name them because name the institution because that will give away who the person was. And by the way, he has met the NSA here, Ajit Doval, everybody, and I've, liaised with electronics, telecom people. And I told him, and by the way, he's told me, I have not gone, and he's now in Tsinghua University in Beijing, helping them master quantum computing. That is why we are now the leading country in the world in space satellite, quantum computing. That's absolutely immune to penetration by anybody.
Maybe penetration, yes.
So quantum computing is that kind of a thing. Now here's this person helping Tsinghua University, and what's his brief? That you'll train Chinese scientists. They give him the best brains of China. He teaches them. He said, Bharat, because you said I shouldn't go to China, I shouldn't accept the offer. I didn't do so for 1 year. He told me that. He said, but I don't have a family, but I have a dog and I am a mother. I have to look after them. What will I do? If nothing is there, and then he didn't get along with, he doesn't suffer fools easily. So what happens is fell afoul of all the bureaucratic scientist types, who are clogging up everything in that institution. I won't name it. They're into very high, and we are not gone anywhere there. Because if you lose people like this, talent like this, what happens? You'll get nothing. The dregs remain in India. The others are say, well, Maru Boli, I mean, better places to go to where I'm appreciated. This guy is a pioneer, an intellectual pioneer of quantum computing. Everybody in the world recognizes him. And yet, when I went to that corporate entity we have here, which looks after all the Infosys, all these big companies, they're NSSAI or something, National Association, whatever. That thing. I went to a former chairman, or chairman at that time or whatever. I said, look, I asked this guy, how much money do you want? He said, Bharat, for the money I'm going to ask you, I'll set up an entire quantum computing and algorithm writing center to train Indians. At the highest levels, I'll take the best and the brightest, pay them well, and create a cadre here in India of hugely talented scientists and so on. He needed, how much? 3 crore rupees to set up a center. 3 crores to set up a center to train quantum computing technicians, technologians, algorithm writers. Everything these days, weapons included, are run on algorithms. And we don't have good algorithm writers in India. He said, I'll train them. I'm amongst the best. He knew how good he was. So he could say that. Very immodest fellow. But very bright people tend, when they're frustrated, to be immodest. And he said, I can't live on thin air. You know what Tsinghua is paying him? $1 million tax-free a year. Hard currency. Not renbin, bao, or whatever the damn Chinese currency is. And the finest lab you can think of in the world is his command jet. The best Chinese brains are his talent pool. He's training them. Within 3 years of his going to Beijing, they set up a satellite with quantum computing.
Yeah.
So, when you don't appreciate your own talent, but you give them a slogan, Atmanirbharta, the idea is good. Idea is good. But how do you follow up a good idea? Where the Chinese win all the time. Why do they win it? Because they are, I think I may have mentioned it the last time I talked with you, we invented the zero, the concept of zero, the ultimate mathematical tool. Without zero, there's no mathematics. The ultimate tool. But it was an abstraction. We also conceived of infinity, neti, not this, not this, not this, in Sanskrit, Okay, right? We invent zero, we invent infinity. The mathematical notions of infinity and zero. Think of how extraordinary that is, but also how abstract that is. Most people can't even get wrap their minds around what these things are. What's a zero? We say just put a zero and shunya, and that's about our knowledge of. But entire mathematics depends on zero
Yep.
and the binary notions. Everything depends on zero. Then you bring in infinity notions. Then you get into, complex mathematical formulations. We are supposed to have invented the calculus, algebra, that went through Arab lands and were called Arabic numerals and whatnot, and they got incorporated in the European thing, and they ran with it. What did the Chinese do? They have taken, they are into applications. They're not into abstract thinking. They did not invent zero. They did not conceive of infinity. But damned if they didn't, if their entire governments and the emperors were not judged by what they did for the people in terms of infrastructure projects. Okay, well, think of, you think Xi Jinping and then Xiaoping were started all this? The Great Wall of China was started in 618 BC, completed, sorry, 618 AD, completed in 1681 AD. Took them 3,000, 2,000 or 3,000, 2,300 years to build the Great Wall of China, to keep out the barbarians. It's 22,000 kilometers long. It is the only man made thing that can be seen from the moon. They built it where there was continuity of vision. Think of how many dynasties came over 2,000 years for them to keep at the project, saying, yeah, we'll build it, bypass, each dynasty succeeding another, but keeping to the project until they had it in 1681, the finished product, to keep the barbarians from the heartland China. When do the Chinese consider their golden period? The Tang dynasty. When was the Tang dynasty? Well, it was from again 6,000, I think 680, around the same thing, AD to 907 AD. It's supposed to be the golden period. When Chinese say we want to recover that golden period of Tang dynasty, they're talking about that. When, by the way, Kashmir and Kabul kingdoms were tributaries of China, according to the Chinese thing. I'm so glad they haven't claimed Kashmir. They're very nearly there. No, but this is the truth. They were tributaries, but then again, the Chinese had a weird sense of tributary system. Anybody who wanted to trade with China had to come to Beijing and kowtow. And if you just wanted friendly relations, you were considered a tributary state. So you shouldn't take the tributary notion seriously. Except the fact that the Tang dynasty stated Kabul and Kashmir as their tributary states. And unlike us, because we have no records, because we didn't keep any, there are actual records in the Chinese archives from 4,000 years ago on paper. So all the Chinese emperors were known by the public works they had made in their reign. The great canal on the Yellow River, for instance, the Grand Canal, same thing. It was done during the Tang dynasty, which is the imperial, the golden period. The first Tang emperor said, oh my God, my predecessors have thought of the Great Wall. I should think of something grand. And he thought of the Grand Canal that now connects, still operational.
Yeah.
it. Yes, he did it with slave labor, and he was very bad. No human rights, no nothing. But he's created a canal that's still being used for riverine transport. 2,000 years later. So what I mean is, this is how you influence. Influence is what? By example. You come into Beijing, you're dazzled. You go into Shanghai, you're dazzled by the embankment and the Pudong. You're dazzled by it. It's more modern in connectivity than New York. I was dumbfounded. You know, I was dumbfounded when I went to Shanghai. I was like a yokel, a village yokel, looking at, I think, marveling at extraordinary structures coming up. The infrastructure there, as I said, roads being built not for tomorrow, for day after tomorrow. Whole Shanghai, the skyscrapers are going up with no rentiers, which is bad news, because it's wasted resources. But they think they can attract the business from world over who want to set up their presence there, and they made it. You may think that it was silly and it is waste of money. It may be. If you look at economies, they're arguing, the whole kind of bunch of monies are spent invested. It's virtually a dead waste, etc. And China
So
would have to pay.
that's a different subject.
This is the whole point. But this is part of the very thing. So how did they, the influence is, okay, do we, for instance, in our immediate neighborhood, they got the Hambantota port for 99 years. Why? Because the Sri Lankans couldn't pay back $1.4 billion.
It's a joke.
Wouldn't it have been strategic for the Indian government to say, okay, we'll pay the Chinese off for you, we'll give it to you, but you should leave the Hambantota port open for Indian, use, military use or whatever. Like we have in Trincomalee. We have access to Trincomalee base. Trincomalee base was what Lord Nelson called the finest deep water port in Asia. We have it. We could have had Hambantota. Trincomalee is at one end, Hambantota at the other. We would have controlled the entire 8-degree and 9-degree channels. But did anybody in Delhi think? We would have asked the Sri Lankans, please, we'll take them off your hands. And we don't want anything from you. We don't want anything. But let us have an agreement that our submarines and our warships can, when we want, we can come in and set up a radar station perhaps or something, as we have done in Seychelles, as we have done in the Maldives, as we have done on the Mozambican coast. And, we can share the data. You can run it with us. You could have offered any kind of stuff. 1.4 billion. We have 700 billion hard currency exchange right now. 1.4 billion. We couldn't have given to the Sri Lankans to say, here, please take it. Chinese, they would have fallen at our feet and said, thank you very much. Because they would rather be beholden to Indians than to Chinese, whom they don't understand. They understand them as much as we understand the Chinese. It's nothing, zero. Couldn't we have done that? Does it need some strategic brain to tell them that? Did anybody here still at least try to see if we couldn't have done that? I've been saying Pakistan needs $3 billion. $3 billion. We could have bought them for $3 billion 2 months ago. I pleaded for it on my blog. I said, let's give them $3 billion. They'll be friends for life. But because why do you think we are so excited about Pakistan's enmity and we get our goat up every time we get our gander up, and our blood boiler, Pakistan. Cricket mein maro, usko maro. All this, great heroics are only against Pakistan, whom we know we can beat anytime blindfolded with only one hand and both hands tied behind our backs. Pakistan is nothing. Pakistan is a nuisance, not a threat. If you're realistically a military realist and you're not into idiotic, political
Yeah, yeah.
whatever sloganeering. Like that Pakistan is a nuisance. It's what I've been saying for 30 years in all my books. But all our resources are going into short-legged aircraft, short-legged rockets, short-legged this. We can't do anything. Why are we now being militarily hindered? Because none of our armaments have long legs.
Long leg.
No long legs. So Chinese have everything is long-legged. That's the other thing. Because the notion of Tianxia is order under the heaven, as you call it. Their concept of world order is Tianxia. Order under the heaven. And what does that mean? Order under the heaven on Chinese terms, naturally. Not for,
The
Tianxia is
Middle
not
Kingdom, yes, sir.
it's a Chinese order. And they have great sense of order. There's extraordinary anarchy in China during the era of the warring kingdoms and so on, as there was here in India. In Vedic India, the old India, there was extraordinary because anyway, that's a different subject altogether. But the problem was that there was so much disorder and so much, shall we say, uh, unsettled milieu that foreigners came and took advantage of us. But then again, also because we were prone to all kinds of vices in terms of making compromises, not realizing who it is you were dealing with. Whether it's the Chinese today, it was the British yesterday, or someone else the day before. They're coming in as traders. Oh, no, we have no sense of the waters at all. Everything was kala pani, Finished. That's finished us of our, the
Yeah.
entire strategic sense was gone. So this is how we were. Now, who do you blame for all this? You can say culture, but that's not true. Because if you read my books, why India, this is nuclear weapons and Indian security. It's it is, I think, the most authoritative book because it's written on the basis of information given me by our nuclear scientists and weapons people and so on. We could have, the Vedic in the Vedas, Rig Veda and so on. There are absolute descriptions of, Brahmastra is not just a word. It's the first culture to actually conceive of weapons of mass destruction
Mass destruction.
in so many words. And then, by the way, spell out the doctrines for their use. Do you know that?
The Rig
This
Veda.
is the kind of stuff we had. We lost it all somewhere. But the point to make is when people say we have no strategic culture, we are what we are. Not true. We had a strategic culture. It may be, but then we have no sense, we have no record keeping as the Chinese have. No tradition, no historical background. We haven't kept records. The Chinese, as I said, have written records from, by the way, their collectors in districts saying what the revenue was 4,000 years ago. They're actual records. Reports to be sent to the emperor about how much money is coming in from this treasury branch, this stream. Do you know that? That is why they built on it. But when the communists came, the merely took over a system already existing. They have meticulous records. Do you know that most of our HAL plants that have produced, starting with MiG-21s from way early on to everything else, we have no records of how many engines we have built, how many airframes we have built. No one keeps any record. Do you know that? We have no record. You go into a factory, they have no record of how they did anything. People retire, they come and retire. No idea what they're doing. As I said, because they're screwdrivering. But if you kept records, you'll know exactly how it was done, and you would have built up a culture of innovation. Oh, this is how it is done. Let me improve it. Then nothing. No one gives in thought. People come to HL, they go away. Nobody knows whether it's on the assembly floor or at the highest levels of HL. No one has any notion of innovation, right? So you can't, in the modern era, have a record of how you have assembled your aircraft or your aircraft engines at Koraput and so on and so forth, or the HL plants. What the heck are we talking about in terms of what you're going to do elsewhere? Thank God the LCA somehow survived,
Yeah.
despite the IAF, not because of it. Everywhere else, IAF would have been the flag bearer, pushing these guys, saying, come on, let's go. But here, no, not in India. Where there are commissions to be made, a lot of people getting rich within the military. I'm sorry to say the corruption has seeped into the military, as you perhaps may be aware. So military is what, like any other government agency. How are they different? Yes, when you're younger, you may be sent to battle. You may lose your life. But as you rise higher, things become very, very comfortable. This entire attitude of government service, as they're filled with entitlement syndrome. Whether you join a military or you are join a civil service or even a clerk, it's entitlement. Why? Because you're given free housing, free this, free that. Which country in the world gives? I'm not talking about third world. Third world are precisely our problem. In America, other than the president of the United States, does anybody get free housing in America? The cabinet ministers or secretaries to the government, top bureaucrats? They drive their own cars. Only the president gets a limousine. Here, every joint secretary, undersecretary, every collector, nobody gets a car driven by a state employee. How the how the heck do you expect to improve when those who are managers of the state are so taken care of that they have no incentive to do anything? They love the system because the system is good for them. After all, ultimately, the self-interest comes in, does it not? Honestly, if I'm well off, things must be good for everybody.
True. True. Hmm.
So this is the kind of stuff that happens. We do not have, we cannot compare ourselves to China because China is so far ahead in everything. They do things meticulously. And they cannot brook a countenance losing an inch of territory if you have no geographic sense. That's also part of their influence operations. They think what is ours, what is everybody else is also ours if we can take it somehow. Not a bad idea.
Yeah.
What's not so good about it? And they go into a country with a definite idea. Okay, what's it rich in? It's rich in cobalt. Fine. We'll go to the mines minister and say, here's a Swiss villa for you, Please take it, our gift. We are a good friend of the great regime in Beijing, great Chinese peoples. You are such a great beneficiary of the Chinese people's gratitude for you. Here's the Swiss villa for you to live in. Some African, I'm saying anybody.
Yeah, that's how they've done it in the Solomon, sir.
That's how they do it.
Yeah.
Right? And the next thing you know, their company has taken over the cobalt mines. They've taken over the copper mines. They control all the mineral reserves of Central Africa.
Central
Right
Africa.
now. Yes, everything. From zinc to copper to cobalt to beryllium to every damn thing. They control it. Lithium. Now they're going after lithium.
Peru.
Everywhere. Including Afghanistan. Because lithium is, Afghanistan has big reserves of
Northern
lithium.
Afghanistan. Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, this is how influence is extended. That's how your presence is extended. It can rub people the wrong way. Yes. The Chinese are brusque. They're not nice and oily. They are straightforward, they'll just stay. And look at their Zhongnan Hai spokesman. No nonsense. They'll tell you what the thing is. India is always wrong. You are capturing our territory.
Yeah.
What are you yakking about? They'll say that virtually in so many words, in diplomatic words. While Acharya, we are very fortunate to have a thing and this, that. And yes, we are withdrawing as per, we in fact have advanced our date for withdrawal more than the Chinese have. And we take credit for all these kind of nonsense things. What What is the problem? How do we believe our worst adversary, but do not trust our eyes? When you say you have affected a withdrawal right now in Eastern Ladakh, as I've said in that interview, you've done so because they wanted to incentivize a meeting with Xi, Modi's meeting with Xi.
Yo.
You said, okay, so in a sense, you have been rewarded by saying, we'll withdraw. But they've withdrawn it from the area that they've captured from you. So, and you are withdrawing from your own area while they are withdrawing some little distance in our area and saying it's a great withdrawal and great, actions to promote peace. I love this kind of stuff. I like to go into some other country, take their land, and then give about 2 yards of it and say, okay, I'm really very happy and peaceful character, and you can also withdraw some more. And we say it's peace. We're happy with it. I mean, you see, for me, the frustration is, grows every year by the month because you see this happening. And by the way, India succeeds despite that because we have so much critical mass. We are so big. We are rich in everything, tremendous talent. We have done everything. But we don't know how to use our talent. We don't know how to use our resources. We don't know. And therefore, everybody looks out for himself or herself and for short-term gains. A petty trader going there, getting Chinese goods to import to India. Some other official doing something else. Some MEA guy doing that. Our field commander saying, "Arey, who wants actual fight in Eastern Ladakh? Fighting is always difficult. So you can have samosas and chai at that damn core level commander meeting, and then they don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what they're talking about. Because they take great care in speaking only in Chinese. We take great care in speaking in English, which you're all good at, and I'm speaking about myself, also. And we think we are great because we can speak English well. The Chinese also understand very well how to speak English, but they don't. They always speak in Chinese. So they spend 3 hours and tax your patience to, smithereens, because you're nobody is knowing what's happening. Right? By the time they translate, it comes down to one line: "No, we will not withdraw." I mean, this is negotiation. Beautiful
Yes, again,
strategy. It's strategy where you tax your patience to the extreme, where the other side just gives up and says, "Oh God, this is too much. We can't handle it." Why? Because we are, what I use the word, occidentalized. We are so occidentalized. While for them, they think time is always their friend. Time is their virtue, their asset. They'll just stretch everything out until the other side gives up. That's what's happening in our JWG, Joint Working Group. That's what's happening at the level of the NSA meetings. We don't adopt the same thing. Okay, if you don't want it, we don't want it either. Let's have it for 1,000 years. That's why the Vietnamese said, when they talk about their differences with China, they call it a 1,000-year war.
Yeah.
That's why they are so respected by the Chinese. The only people they respect are the Vietnamese. First, because they have beaten them time and again in military matters. This ultimately the ultimate adjudicator of reality is military victory or defeat. And they have beaten them every time. So what do you say? What the Chinese have said is, don't tangle with these guys. That's a lesson they have learned. Don't tangle with. You can beat up on Indians, the idiots. They are just passive types. They are fools of no. What contempt they have for India, which is historic, by the way. Just so you don't think we go to Fasiyan and say, "Oh, they went to Patliputra and went back and greatly impressed." It's true, but Patliputra was long time back, 7th century or whatever. Fasiyan, the travelers who came to learn Buddhism or whatever it is. What's the real thing? In 1930s, when Rabindranath Tagore and all these, Indian intellectuals, so-called, went there, when India was, colony, and they started lecturing, doing Gumindang regime, Chiang Kai-shek's China at the time. When he spoke up, all the young, revolutionaries there said, We have, who are these people from a slave country telling us how to behave? Do you know that? The contempt for Rabindranath Tagore and all these people, Radha Krishnan and all these people who came there, talk about Asian peace and Asian this, concord and Asian people. They have nothing in common with you, the Chinese told them. The young intellectuals told them, you have nothing in common with you. You are a slave nation. Don't talk to us.
It's quite a
That's
hard
the
hitting fact that you told us.
Yeah, but that's a fact. We have slave mentality. Why do you think we have not succeeded? We are just coolies. Our intellectuals are coolies. What are Infosys? What are all these big things? What kind of labor do you think they do in America? Labor saving coolie work. Do they actually design the software chip? No. They design what is given them. Then they innovate here in the R&D centers in Bangalore and so on. But the original design is done in Texas Instruments headquarters in Dallas or somewhere. Or whatever. All these Hewlett Packard, they all have R&D centers here. Why don't we do our own thing and patent things and go with stuff and have the government invest in these things? They come on, guys. Let the world buy from us our intellectual property rights, our technology, our ideas, rather than I work for Texas Instrument for very good salary and I'm quite happy. Well, what I make, the formula I come up with, I gave to Texas Instrument, whatever. Texas Instrument is just a company. Any other company, there are millions of them all over. They say, thank you very much. Here, another $100,000 a year annual salary for you. Oh, wow, great stuff. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much. They go and get the IPR and then make billions of dollars on your idea. And we don't even know that. We are cogs in their intellectual machine. We're quite happy being cogs. Just as we were a cog in the imperial economic design for the world. The jewel in the crown. Right? But that's a fact. And we prided ourselves. Our grandfathers were given idiotic titles, Khan Bahadur, Rao Sahib. Oh, we boasted that. We all have that in our families, in our background. Do you wonder why the Chinese have contempt for you, for Indians? They have no respect for you. I remember Keshi Pant, the former defense minister, telling me once, I was close to him. He says I had gone as defense minister to Beijing. And he innocently, he was such an innocent, he asked the Chinese, how do we figure as a threat to you? How do you... No, you're not a threat. You're not on our radar. They told him in those words to our defense minister. Yeah, what threat was that? It's what we should tell the Pakistanis. What threat? Tomorrow we'll remove the entire army from our western border. We'll keep some people on the LAC simply because it's still not resolved. Otherwise, remove all our things which I've been suggesting. Remove all our things. Demobilize our 3 strike corps. That's how you do it. That's how you restructure our land forces. Restructure them to one composite corps for any Pakistani contingency. It's never going to happen. Now put the additional 2 corps, 17 corps you raised for the so-called offensive mountain operations.
Mountain ops.
Yeah? Offensive mountain op, not just mountain op. Mountain ops, you have mountain divisions there. Offensive mountain op. Now, I'd like to see what offensive mountain op they're going to have in mind. You want to take Tundle, the T-72s up there? Those wretched things don't start at those heights. Yet the army has not thought of developing at Aadi and all the DPSUs we have, a light tank with a high torque engine for high altitude operations. For 70 years, we didn't get that. We didn't know that Himalayas, there's rarefied air. We didn't know that. We have placed tanks in the northern Sikkim plains that abuts on the Tibetan plateau for tank operations. We didn't know that. I mean, it is very difficult.
Yeah.
Look at what the Chinese have done now by way of geostrategic reach and presence. They're in Solomon Islands. You must have seen the newspaper news reports. Now they've taken
Some
over Solomon Islands, which means they've breached the third
third,
chain.
third chain.
Third chain, not second chain. They've gone past second chain now. Now they're on to the third chain. That's why Americans are sweating in their pants. Well, they're like Indians, no? I mean, in a sense, they are so wealthy, as Kissinger said. I think I may have repeated it to you, I may have said it to somebody else. But Americans, Kissinger has said, we don't need to strategize. We are too wealthy, we are too powerful. Really, they said, we don't need to strategize. We have strategy, yes. I'm considered a strategist. So we don't need to strategize. We are too wealthy, too powerful. We can do anything because we are so wealthy and powerful. And therefore, we don't need to strategize. We'll take it whenever it comes, we'll deal with it, and then come in with a hammer blow and finish off Iraq, finish off Afghanistan. And then, of course, when body bags come up, we run away. It doesn't matter. Someone else suffers. Who cares? Iraqis, Afghans, Vietnamese, who gives a damn? As long as no Americans are affected across the modes of the Atlantic and the Pacific. That's what strategy is also. That's grand strategy, meta strategy. You don't give a damn, You'll go upset, finish off Iraq, you kill off Saddam, you think you've done a great thing, and finish off the entire West Asia.
Ukraine.
You go to Vietnam, you finish off Vietnam and finish off Indochina. And yet you say you're doing this, you're doing that. The only person you end up entrenching is China. Your supposedly worst enemy. I mean, but they can afford it. For countries like us who lack the mobilization capacity, the capacity to mobilize the resources. We have a lot of resources, but as I said, unable to mobilize well, marshal them well for a purpose. So this is what Chinese have. Now they have breached the third island chain, which means they're next to Hawaii, not very far, just an aircraft carrier's distance away for operation.
Guadalcanal was a big battle.
So Liangyang, the new aircraft carrier, look at the aircraft carrier they have. It is really very large. It's not a light carrier like the Vikrant we have just opened with 45,000 tons. So they are so thinking, and they're relentless. There's not just one thing and they stop or they're satisfied. We are satisfied so easily with doing one little thing. Oh, we are quite satisfied. Chinese are relentless. And that is the secret of the success. They don't give up. It's like the emperors of how many governments, how many dynasties started the China Wall. 3,000 years later, some way down dynasty completes it. And he has all the record books to say who did what in their reign. They keep to it. That is vision. This is the kind of stuff that we have to admire in our adversaries. We have to appreciate why it is they're doing so well and not cloud our brains because of our enmity or because we have feelings of animosity. You can have that. I have that. But that doesn't mean I don't appreciate the attributes. And that's why I've recommended at the highest levels, I've said, if we don't have the strategic brains, that's okay. Some of us are not really, as nations, and not everybody is as well endowed or strategic minded. I said, then at least if you don't have the strategic brains to think things through, then just imitate the Chinese. You don't use your brains. Don't use your brains. Too much for you. My akal to hai nahi. ठीक है, कोई बात नहीं. Doesn't matter. Do the next best thing. Do what your adversary does. ये भी नहीं कर सकते आप. Can't do that. If you don't have the strategic vision, you don't have the strategic brain, you are there for the short game. The short game. You're in it for the short game. Short ends. Not enduring peace or enduring order that you control. No. You're for short, myopic, short-sightedness. So this is where things we fall out. So forget about influence operations in terms of whether you can ever match China. Unless you get all these basics wrong, which we have gotten wrong, we don't correct them. What do you think our chances are of getting anywhere near to China? To become some kind of a peer competitor, some kind of a rival, 100 years hence. Is that too far? Think of what the Chinese time frame is. By 2049, they said 2149, they said they are going to outrace America to be the premier nation in the world. That is why they're moving so relentlessly in every sector of human endeavor. They have a second space station coming up. Space station, not a Mangalyaan thing that goes around Mars. Okay, that's a great thing you did in one the first time. But a space station which becomes a weapons platform. It becomes a satellite platform for all kinds of stuff. For cyber warfare, for photo imagery, for this, for that, for launching weapons from space, space to ground weapons, space to air weapons, space to space weapons. That's what they're working on. When they say 2049, that's a hard time frame, not like ours. Kaladan corridor, 22 years. Second space station, the only country to now have two or three quantum satellites, helped by us Indians. So I said, maybe the next best thing is to hire ourselves out to the Chinese. I mean, we do that one way or the other. I mean, what do we do? What do we do? When we can't critique our thing, we get upset when people criticize us. We like flattery. We all like flattery. But for a nation to just swallow whole the democratic thing, I've always said about the Indian military, as I've said about our Indian democracy, they work better on paper than actually in the field, right? For all the reasons I mentioned. And yet those are the virtues that we broadcast, great democracy, yes, okay. But how does it actually work I don't know. What do you think of our democracy? Or what do you honestly think about our military? So all these things are various aspects of the state that have deep roots, and they're all interconnected, one to the other.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's not as if there's influence. Influence is an outcome.
Outcome of all these
It's
actions.
not. It's not the root branches are someplace else, and the whole bunch of things in every respect, and every aspect of life, national life. If you're unable to summon the will, unable to summon the effort required, because it requires a lot of effort, a lot of sacrifice, and not going to come easy. But we expect everything to come easy. That's why we jump onto whatever bandwagon is passing by. We outsource our strategic security. We make compromises with our security. We ride, I keep saying, we ultimately, we want free rides everywhere in everything, including security. Right? We are free riders of security. We have done that. Earlier we did it on the Russian coattails, the SU coattails, Soviet Union's coattails. Now we are doing it on American coattails. And we take pride in it. And by the way, as I said, I schooled in America. I appreciate America very much. Why? Because they are very hard-nosed when it comes down to national security. Ultimately, they don't give a damn for anything else, anybody else. No morals, no ethics, no nothing. And you want to screw somebody, screw him proper. And then they write it all down. The congressional record is all there. We're going to screw you. 5 years
Yeah.
later, they go and screw them. Make no bones about it. But as Kissinger said, they do it because they can do it. We can't do it. And therefore, we have to be more hard headed and we have to buckle down like the Vietnamese are. They suffered enormous stuff. When I went to Vietnam the first time, it was as a pilgrimage. I say that in my introduction to my new book that's coming out. I don't know when it'll finish, maybe next year sometime. But it's a pilgrimage. Those people are the greatest, not just survivors. They sacrificed, they made themselves into a nation. You go into Vietnam, there's such delicacy, the things they produce. I mean, it's an incredible country, small little country that just beats up on everybody. Well, and
That's
I
true,
keep
sir.
using, and I use a phrase for India that is used by a Polish sociologist. He called India a nation of subjugations. A nation of subjugations. You're a subjugated people. You don't have brains of free people. In some sense, therefore, the Chinese, when they say 100 years of humiliation, we want to excoriate the system, we want to expunge it of this 100 years of humiliation. 100 years? Now count
1,000.
our time of slavery, subjugation. 100 years, they make such a big thing of it. And we make nothing of 1,000 years of subjugation. We feel no shame. The shame is not reflected in our policies. We want to be part of the very people who victimized us
Yeah.
over the years. We feel no compunction. If you want, it's like the Chinese have said openly and they declared it. They say that they will be the predominant country in the world by the centennial anniversary of their revolution, which is 2149.
2049.
That's just another how many odd years? 27 odd years, right? 28 odd years. Now, think of it. They already say, the American military, I read these kinds of documents all over the place, and they say that they've already surpassed us, actually, in military terms. They have a much larger navy. They have almost double the size of the US Navy. Do you know that? There are some 650 ships, most of them junks. Okay, fine. Okay, get it. But the American Navy, why do you think they're so afraid of coming inshore? And people were palpitating in the US Navy and the US military trying to get their warships into the Taiwan Strait during the recent crisis. Because they were not sure that the Chinese wouldn't start something. What would have happened had they torpedoed an aircraft carrier? The USS Ronald Reagan that was there. Let's say they had loosed off a salvo of their supersonics, cruise missiles at them. What do you think would have happened? That is what the Americans really feared. Because while you have the USS Ronald Reagan there, that is the only aircraft carrier task group there, with about a flotilla of 6 escorts, a submarine. What would they have done? So this is the thing. The point being, all the dealings are on Chinese terms. You want peace, it's on Chinese terms. You want war, it's on Chinese terms. See the point and the beauty of it? What are we doing? It's always reacting to China. Are we setting the pace and say, hey, we're going to capture the old Kurnak fort in the Pangong area. Let's see what you do. Chalo, now we can negotiate. After we capture it, we'll negotiate it. Dekha jayega. Do we do that? We are not proactive. They are the ones who are proactive. They take over everything and then say, let's negotiate. We are peaceful people. Becoming a great power needs more than just declarations and pronouncements, and more than wishes and desires.
True, sir. True. Absolutely.
It needs hard policies and people that are hard headed and hard nosed about policies. What's a national interest? And narrowly defined. We're not out there to spread democracy and values. No, no, no. America can do that, it doesn't do it. The rhetoric does it. You can have the rhetoric, oh, we are the harbingers of peace and this, that. No. Your thing is to screw your adversary as much as you can. And here is an adversary, China, that's worthy of being screwed, because they have screwed you relentlessly. We were the ones, we eased their entry into the United Nations Security Council, into a seat that was offered India by John Foster Dulles in the 1950s, that Khrushchev offered us in the 1950s. United Nations Security, Taiwan seat was offered to us first. Both the superpowers saying, please, here, have it. Nehru said, no, 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 no. How can we leave out the Chinese? We'll always come in because they are so great.
Sir, I must say one thing. The biggest takeaway that I take from your talk is that the reason that we don't have influence is because we don't actually think strategically. That's something you brought out with multiple examples, and that's something I'm grateful for it, because it's something that India needs to talk about, and that's one of the reasons why I want to do this more often, so that we can, in my small circle of 1,000, 2,000, 4,000, 5,000 people, where I can get a conversation, and hoping that those people can carry the message forward, and probably our next generation would be in a better frame of mind of understanding strategic issues than what we were when we were about 16 or 18 or 20, for that matter. I think that's one thing that I see in certain parts of the world, that there are young people, teenagers, who are interested in reading and this and that, which is not prevalent in India as much, because it's probably a simple way of putting it. History is a very boring subject. बहुत bore होता है पढ़ के. So I guess that mentality has seeped into us, where we've forgotten our values and the strategic thought. I'd like to thank you, sir, for at least waking us up in certain aspects. It's always a pleasure talking to you, sir, and I hope for continued interactions with you, because I guess India is at a point of time where we've lost a lot of time. We are trying to do stuff, all of them at once, making mistakes, and I think we do have an opportunity going forward, and let's see how we do. So that's all I would say.
Well, we can always be optimists.
Absolutely, yes, sir. Optimist with a hint of reality, I guess. That's how I would put it. Yeah. Thank you, sir, for joining me, and it's always a pleasure interacting with you. Till next time, for another subject, sir. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much. Bye. How do I get off?